What's a happening, nerds? This is John nerding out with cards. After doing that video with Rob Cash Cards on, the Cardinals and Reds and where our histories, linked together, one of the things was Walt Jocketty. And one of the things that we pointed out was, the moves that he made, and arguably the best move he ever made for the Cardinals was hiring Tony LaRussa away from the Oakland Athletics. And Tony LaRussa is my all-time favorite manager. And after doing that video with Rob and getting to go through more and more of my stuff, to include like newspapers and everything, I was like, you know what? I want to do a video talking about my favorite manager of all time. I've done videos on my all-time favorite players, my childhood heroes, and I just want to do a video on Tony LaRussa. I know a lot of people hate him, but he is definitively one of the greatest managers of all time. Second all time in wins, which is mind-boggling. But and it's actually quite surprising that he is my favorite manager. Here in St. Louis, Whitey Herzog is beloved, right? But I didn't get to watch the Cardinals during the Herzog years. I was, I think, 4 when he resigned. Obviously, I didn't know anything about baseball when I was 4 years old. And I definitively remember 1996 being just a big season. I was 11 years old. My grandmother was sending me VHS tapes, newspapers, and all these things going back to 95 when I was 10. And that just kind of kept carrying over. And my newspaper collection has kept going since then. But yeah, so Tony LaRussa hired in 1996. And, it was when I cared about graded cards, I wanted to find Tony LaRussa's first Cardinals card graded. And it's this Kansas City Life police set, which was a stadium giveaway, is his first Cardinals card, because Topps was not issuing out manager cards at that time. What's the grade of this card? Doesn't matter what the grade is. But, Tony LaRussa is a member of the Cardinals Hall of Fame, so he is in my collection there. He's part of the inaugural class. His first Topps card is that 2001 Topps card. Really cool stuff. I mean, the LaRussa years was amazing. I tell you what, as a, let's say a Cardinals hater, LaRussa hater, or anything like that, one of the things that I highly recommend, 3 Nights in August. This is personally my favorite all-time baseball book. And all it is it is, a complete, strategy, what's going on in the game, before the game, after the game, of 3 games, 3 regular season games in August in 2003. And it's unbelievable. It gets into, having to deal with players. It gets into strategies during the game, all this stuff. And it's such an amazing book. As a matter of fact, I'm going to reread it. What's really cool about my copy is, because this book came out in after the 2004 season. But I got to meet Tony LaRussa at this mom and pop bookshop that's since closed down. And I had him autograph my copy of this book. Still got my little ticket thingy with it. Really cool stuff. But going back to my newspaper collection, like I said, my grandmother was saving me Post-Dispatch papers and mailing them to me or what have you. But Tony LaRussa has been the recipient of the Manager of the Year award several times. And the season, it would be easy. You see all this stuff, and I highlight World Series and everything, but the most memorable, both good and bad seasons for me as a Cardinals fan was actually 2002. Uh, it was my dad retired from the Navy. We moved back to St. Louis. I'm getting to go to Cardinals games. That was the year that was marked by a tragedy. Darryl Porter, 82 World Series hero, passed away. Jack Buck passed away. Darryl Kyle, the ace of the staff, passed away in a hotel in Chicago. And they still managed to have a successful season, I think in large part due to LaRussa being such a great manager. And he was a recipient of the Manager of the Year award for the National League. You can see after an unfair year. And that's why I do have this newspaper. LaRussa is also, he brought a lot of success to St. Louis. So 2006 World Series. A lot of people poo-pooed on that World Series because it was, between two flyover, teams from flyover states and things like that. He also spearheaded the 2011 World Series. And we also went to the 2004 World Series under his guidance, but so much success under his leadership. He came out with another book, and I have it, One Last Strike. And I could see where most baseball fans would not be interested in this book. Cardinals fans, LaRussa fans definitely would be interested in it. And I'll share some pictures here. But, this one's also autographed because he did a book signing at the Books A Million, here in town. And, by this point in time, 2012, I was stationed in St. Louis, so it was real easy for me to go, and I went there with my dad. But it was a great book on, for LaRussa. It was a trying season. There's obviously the epic comeback leading up to, them miraculously making the plays up, postseason. And, after that epic one, game 162. And then ultimately leading to a World Series championship. And he went out on top at that time. Because at that time he was the third winningest manager in Major League Baseball history, all-time winningest manager in Cardinals history after 16 seasons. And then, he, a decade later came out of retirement for the White Sox. But, after that season, what did he do? He retired, or so we thought. And so, of course, I had to get this newspaper, which, it's kind of funny that he, became my favorite manager. I guess it helps that, it's not like I have a choice in the matter, and the team became successful and whatnot. But it's sort of like Willie McGee in a sense. Like, Willie McGee's a LaRussa guy. One of his best friends is Ozzie Smith. Well, Ozzie Smith hates LaRussa. And that was a very unfortunate thing in 1996. But, LaRussa has a pattern of doing what he thinks is best for the team. He pitch hit for, Kerry Robinson for Mark McGwire in the 2001 playoffs. Turned out to be what would have been McGwire's last at bat. And, McGwire's a big LaRussa guy. LaRussa's a big McGwire guy, but it's just circumstances at the time, what have you. So I don't believe there's anything malicious with LaRussa to Ozzie. As a matter of fact, I think that LaRussa was very, gracious throughout that 96 season, especially after, Ozzie announced his retirement and he was having his, lap around the league there at the end. And I've never heard LaRussa say a negative thing about Ozzie. Unfortunately, Ozzie's had a lot of negative to say about Tony, but then you move forward a little bit, and they retired his number. See, I got that newspaper here, and what's cool is you can see all the other retired numbers up here. But at that game, they did a stadium giveaway, and I dig those. This isn't a bobblehead, it's a statue, but a friend of mine got this for me. Really cool stuff. I have it in the display over there. And then, of course, LaRussa being one of the greatest managers of all time. Elected to Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. And it was one of those weird things, like with his retirement and when the committee that he would have fit in. It was, 2013 when he was elected to the Hall of Fame. Even though he had just retired in 2011, he went in with Bobby Cox. And it was a star-studded class. That's for sure. And I think, was it Joe Torre was in with him? There's three of them. Anyway, JWS, John, you can, correct my ignorance down below. And any other Hall of Fame aficionado, right? My guy LaRussa. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Bobby Cox, Joe Torre, Tony LaRussa. Boom. Actually, there's a picture of him on this newspaper. I'm an idiot. But yeah, so I don't have a ton of stuff for LaRussa. There's a couple of books, the newspapers, really good stuff. But yeah, Tony LaRussa is my all-time favorite manager. And it was fun getting to go through all this stuff, especially after doing that video with Rob. But again, I highly recommend anybody who considers themselves a baseball fan to read this book. Absolutely amazing. But, I know this won't be for most people, but I dig it. This is how I nerd out. You nerd your own way.